Welcome to this episode of Cinematic Perspective. This is a continuation of our last episode in which we were discussing the transition from the analog world of pre-2000 and into the digital world post-2000. But we had a little bit more to talk about when it came to the analog world. So here's part 2 of that discussion.
So that was really big analog stuff. We did classes on analog sound. So when you're talking about, razor cutting the audio tape, I used to make loops. I loved making loops and just running loops on multiple kind of reel decks and then just kind of fading them in and out. I always thought that was really fun. I also fell into the trap that you were talking about before because I remember working on my first film project and someone said, "What are you shooting on?" And I said, "Oh, I'm shooting on on Super 8. And they were like, "Really?" And they walked off and they were like, "Huh." It's like, "You're not serious because you're not shooting on 16 mil. And I remember one of the professors saying to me, because we were shooting using the university, he's like, "How's your film going on?" And I'm like, "I'm shooting on Super 8, on 16 mil. And ran off and he laughed. And now I know exactly what he was laughing about because it was like, "Dude, this is your first film. Like, go and make all the mistakes and do it cheaply." I worked as a waiter at night to get the money, to get the film, and then process it, and then telesending it. I still have all of that sort of stuff. It is the worst piece of garbage I have ever seen. Like, when people watch it, there's a part of me that kind of folds in on itself. It's basically, I realize it's the little filmmaker in me trying to fold himself out of existence. But you have to have those experiences.
Oh, yeah,
it's a little bit like editing. When you're writing, write 100 pages of garbage and throw them out for that one piece of gold.
Right.
But what that allowed me to do was I was so determined to finish on film that they did have a moviola in the corner that was broken. And I did go and fix it. And I did slice up a negative a contact print that I paid for to go through that process. And then out of that, learned to take it into the editing suite and went, "Oh my gosh, this is a completely different medium."
Right.
Years later, when I was doing my honors year, which is the 4th year after in Australia, you can do a undergrad, which is a degree, and then you can do what they call an honors year, which is a separate degree. And in that year, I also went and edited 16 mil on a moviola that I was able to get a hold of because I wanted to finish on film and project on film. And again, my teachers were saying, "Just put it to film." And I'm like, "No, I want you to have the experience of understanding that my interest is the image being recorded or exposed through a camera and then projected."
You meant put it to tape?
So they kept saying to me, "Just put it to tape." And I was like, it's almost like saying to me, "You've got to run a 100-meter race, but we're going to go cut one of your legs off." Like, it was like, cinema is not just recording on film.
Right.
It's also projecting that image on a screen and then having that experience.
For the young digital people out there, let me emphasize again, because I've done this in past episodes, but let me emphasize again, there's 2 schools of thought, and I get both sides of this, and I think somewhere in the middle is the best, and that is, we're talking about training and focus and a discipline that is very specific because of the expense, because of the limitations. Now, you may think, well, oh my God, thank God I have digital, because I can shoot as much as I want, and I can experiment, and I can play, and I can record everything, I can record you, I have all this stuff, it's all stored, blah, 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 blah. But I think there's an appreciation that comes from, it's like if you had a flip phone. You had a flip phone that you had to go and get track phone minutes put on it, and you have a flip phone. And then someone hands you the latest iPhone, and you go, oh my God, look at what I can do. Okay, so for us, it was like, I'm shooting on Super 8, and I have to cut, and I have to do this on this little hand winder, and I have to tape splice. And then here's a digital camera, here's a digital file, and here's nonlinear editing. And you go, oh my God, and the sky opens up. But what you have learned is the disciplines of a tougher medium. So I'm always talking to young kids today about, storyboard this. Don't just keep shooting because
Right.
you can. And don't just plink around with your camera because it's right there and you can see it on the monitor. Figure out what you want in advance. Don't shoot hours and hours and hours of stuff because as an editor, you still have to go through all that damn footage. And so my big encouragement, I think what I try to stress to young people is, yes, you look at my old man talk and you go, well, that just sounds horrible, all the stuff you had to go through. In some respects, it was. But I've brought a level of craftsmanship to it, though, that was honed and refined by, struggling uphill both ways to get to school in a storm. And now that I have access to all these things, I'm able to take the discipline that was developed and really move because now it got easier. And maybe there's kids who started off in digital when digital was really raw.
Sure.
And by today's standards, they're going, oh my God, things are so much better now. Maybe they're talking to other digital kids and going, oh, you kids, you don't know. In my day, it was only 256K, and in my day, I only had this. I mean, my day it was only standard def, and it wasn't even, it wasn't even 16 by 9, But yeah, I can't emphasize enough. Do whatever you want, post to TikTok, shoot whatever crap in whatever amounts you want to do. Just learn the history. Learn the history and the techniques, because it will all contribute. It will all help.
I want to expand on this a little bit because I got caught in a trap. I want to go and make videos and talk about some of the things that I'm passionate about again, and I want to do it on YouTube. But I'm trained in a way of planning things out, making sure you've got, most of the time on a film is really writing, and pre-production is the most amount that you're going to ever be able to go and develop an idea. So I go and I make this video and I put 2 months of development. I get everything ready. I shoot it all. I put it together. I put it up on YouTube. It does really, really well. And the comments I get from people is, where's your next video? Why didn't you post something the next day? And I went, next day? Oh, you guys don't realize that, the amount of work that was needed beforehand, storyboarding it, making sure people turned up on time, being able to edit it, have all the sound effects and everything ready to go. And then I went, oh, can I do this, faster? So let's see if I can make a video a week. Now, well before we ever did this podcast, I sent you an email, Wyatt, and I said, can you go take a look at this stuff and see, and can you give me a direction on how to improve it? Now, that never happened. That's okay.
Yeah, no, I never followed up. I never did it.
In my mind, it was always like, you took one look at it and went, I can't help on this. This is terrible, because I was moving so fast and trying to find it.
I got so lost in something else. Yeah, but I know what you're saying. Yeah.
That's okay. You know what? It was motivation for me to train up in a different way, which was, if you're making something so quickly, if you're putting out a video once a week, or now you've got YouTubers who have got camera and edit departments that are shooting stuff constantly, and then they're just churning this content out. You have to find it in the edit. You have a general gist of where you're going to go, what the direction is, but I always, even with some of the tutorials that I do for some software that I'm helping to get the word out for, I will turn it on and I will record everything. I will talk into a microphone and I will spend time just editing out the parts that I don't need, including some of the times where I will stop, think about what I'm just going to say, and then continue on. That was not possible when I started. It was, if you're presenting to camera or you're even recording a voiceover, it was, you want to do it in one take, you want to be precise, you want to make sure that your timing is right, because the going back and trying to edit it the way you do with non-linear, it just wasn't possible. So you had to be a craftsman at whatever the job was. So that's why you had voiceover guys who had careers either doing live to television or to tape recordings where they would get in front of a microphone and it'd be 2 or 3 takes and you're done. And you'd go, this take is the easiest because technically I don't have to do anything to it. Let's go with it.
Hey everyone, this is Wyatt Weed from the Cinematic Perspective podcast. My wife, Gail, created a website called IMarriedTheBoar.com because, well, she married the boar Predator from Predator 2. In my time in Los Angeles, I had a few fun acting jobs, one of which was playing the boar Predator in the end scene of Predator 2. I also had a nice little featured bit in a 3rd season episode of Star Trek The Next Generation called The High Ground. You can go to IMarriedTheBoar.com and find autographed pictures, action figures, our movies on DVD, and other fun merchandise. And I'm sure we'll talk about this more in the future, but there's positives and negatives to both, because I'm going to look at young people who are just crapping out videos or just doing podcast after podcast daily and think, well, your quality's not that good. I think it depends on where your awareness is at, because if you're doing it daily, odds are you're getting better. If you care.
Absolutely.
If you put any effort into it, it's probably getting better.
But to what something you said earlier, though, if they have the content, if the story
Right.
is there, if the
Right.
the information is there, then the quality, video quality, doesn't necessarily have to be
Right, but yeah,
superb.
yeah.
See, I don't consider that to be filmmaking.
No, agreed.
Now, I've made way more social media content than I've ever made films. Like, I'm not making a narrative story that's going to take the audience through a journey and a conclusion. I'm making content for an electronic medium. Now, am I getting better at it? Absolutely, because the more you do it, the more you learn skills, the more you refine it. You know, it used to take me 2 or 3 days to pop out a video and try to work out in the edit what I was going to do. And that led me to a formula. That formula led me to less time to do it. After this recording, I'm going to go and finish off something else that I need to get ready to release tomorrow. So I'm able to do it in a number of hours as opposed to what I was doing before.
Right.
Yeah.
But
Right.
it is not that traditional training that I got. I don't have a department. If I want a light in a certain place, I have to set it up. I have to be behind the camera and in front of the camera. And you can actually even see the way technology has actually evolved, because digital SLR cameras now have a little screen that flips out. So the person who's talking to camera like I am now can see themselves to frame them up.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have a flip out on our camera right now, and that's occasionally I glance at it to make sure the camera's still rolling, but then also to make sure I haven't done something like this, you know, or that I haven't done something like this. Yeah.
That I'm using right now does not have a flip out screen, right? It doesn't. And recently someone said to me, why is all your videos not crisp, you know, laser sharp is what they used. And I went, you know why? Because I'm looking at a little screen on my computer that's taking the signal in, and on that I am crystal clear. Watching it on a big TV, and I'm a little bit out. And I remember sitting here and I thought to myself, I've got to get another camera. I've got to get autofocus so it can pull. And I went, oh, whoa, 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 whoa. I said, stop right there. I said, Gil, you spent enough time understanding that back in the day, they used to have a tape measure.
Yeah, there you go.
They would tape from the focal front to your nose, and then they would dial that in on the lens. Like, they didn't have any autofocus. They didn't have any of that sort of stuff. So what I ended up doing was I ended up putting a mark on the desk and a mark on my chair, and I line those marks up, and that's where I'm going to be. And then I get someone who can go behind the camera, right? And luckily, digital SLR cameras have digital zooms where you can zoom in like 10% and 15%.
Oh,
so
and then
let's
focus.
zoom in all the way to 15%. Let's dial that focus as sharp as we can get, pop it back up, and I'm like in focus. Now, the amazing thing is, I tried to explain this to some of my students who are using the same kind of equipment, and literally their comments are, it's okay if someone walks in the way and it racks focus because the autofocus is trying to work out what's going on. People expect that now. And I went,
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Really? Okay.
Sure, maybe for YouTube or TikTok videos, but Not if you're sitting in the theater watching something.
Right. And there's a reason why if I'm using my phone to film something, I'm always holding my phone this way because I'm emulating the screen in a cinema. It was an incredible marketing move what Instagram did, which was like, oh no, we'll hold it up this way now. So we've got now the frame this way. It's visually different from everyone else, but it's also created this whole kind of, it's messed up kind of what it was expected, which is a window into another world telling a story is now become, this, what is it, is a slice? I don't even know what it is. It's just so frustrating.
Portrait style is fine for certain things. It would be interesting.
Portrait like this is fine. For video?
It'd be interesting to go into a theater. It'd be interesting to send young people into a theater. Oh, it's a new Avengers film. Go see this new Avengers film. We're going to do a test screening of the new Avengers
and only give
film.
them 25%
and only
of the
give
screen?
them this.
Oh my gosh.
I saw a news clip where someone had their phone and they were shooting video of twin tornadoes.
Oh, yeah.
And so, like, they're in, like, Kansas or something. Yes, they've got the phone horizontal or vertical, and they're shooting one tornado, and then they're shooting the other tornado, and then they're shooting this tornado, and I was like, oh, dear God in heaven. Like,
you have a phone you can turn.
If there was ever a time to have widescreen, it's when you've got two real live tornadoes in front of you. But, we're so off.
Gil, you were talking about Instagram and how they've kind of reformatted.
Yes.
I think Facebook has done that too, because I don't do many Facebook Lives, but I want to get more into it. And I did one recently, and I had my phone held properly, if you will. And later when I went back and looked at my Facebook Live, it was all sideways because Facebook had automatically switched it. I'm like, oh, you're killing me.
Yes. And I've been known to yell at people when they're filming, let's say filming me, and I'm like, turn it on the side. And they're like, what? I go, turn it on the side. If I need to crop it down, I can crop it down, but I can't expand it out.
Yeah.
And I always laugh
Yeah.
when I see like an expanded, and they've got like either the ghosted images or they're trying to fill the frame. And it's just, and I'm like, oh, okay, this is a completely generational thing. I mean, I fought for widescreen. You guys, Wyatt, you just mentioned about how when you shot, you framed up the camera. I remember actually taking a Super 16 camera. No, it wasn't. It was 16 mil camera. It wasn't Super 16. Getting a spare film gate and actually welding on pieces of metal and then grinding it back so it wouldn't catch the film to make a widescreen gate. So in the camera, each frame would mat itself as a widescreen format, and then actually having to go and modify the iris so that there were marks for the people who were looking through it, so they knew what was in and what was out.
I gotcha. Okay.
I mean,
right.
it was a physical, matting. So every frame, there was no mat to pull out. That's what you got on a 16 mil thing, and it was a tremendous technical process. And we fought to do that, to try and emulate what we couldn't afford.
And let me stress again to the different age ranges that are listening to this right now. Let me stress that...
Hey, I'm not that old, pal. Wait a second. I'm not that old.
The people in the audience listening. Well, Instagram is Instagram. That's one thing. Facebook is Facebook. That's one thing. Big screen 35 millimeter or 65 millimeter or IMAX is another thing. And it's really, really important. Not everything is TikTok. Not everything is Instagram. Not everything is Facebook. And I think one of the things... Look, I don't like all that stuff. I don't like vertical video. I don't deal with TikTok. I don't even deal with Instagram. But I understand them all, and I understand why they're all there and what they do. But I also understand old school 35 millimeter and Super 8 and 65 millimeter. I understand it all, and I think that makes me more... It's not a triple threat, but I think that my training is more broad, and I think that's what I continue to preach. Don't just... if all you want to be is a social media influencer, then you probably don't need to know about 35 millimeter filmmaking. But I dare say it would make you better at TikTok if you did understand filmmaking. You may not care and you may not need it, but I'll tell you what, some of the hippest, coolest music videos that have ever been made, that just seem like they are so modern and they are so cool. I just recently saw Billy Idol, who was big when we were young, has posted a new music video fairly recently. And I'm sure a lot of young people are going, oh my God, that thing is cool. There's some really neat stuff in that music video. But it's good old school music video, visual techniques, and filmmaking style. And yeah, people are probably looking at it and going, it's so hip, it's so modern, but it still falls back on old techniques.
I got a question for you. When you were in the industry, when was the point where you realized that digital was going to take over? Like, were you in LA at the time? Like, when was that moment where you were like, hang on, this is new. Is this thing's going to change?
So I've talked about Super 8, 16 millimeter. I shot 16 millimeter in film school, which was in the early to mid 80s. I shot videotape throughout the 80s in cable television. And then my first brush with any kind of digital was a digital chip in a camcorder that was still shooting to VHS. And that would have been late 80s. Mm-hmm. And, the image was improving. Things were getting better. It was natively 16:9. Woo. Okay. So then when I went out to LA in 1988, it was still predominantly 35 millimeter. And it was 35 millimeter for television shows. It was 35 millimeter for feature films. And even those low budget trash films that just went straight to video, still shot on film. But a lot of times then they were posting to tape. Or like Star Trek The Next Generation. I know they were shooting 35 millimeter, but they were pretty much scanning to tape and posting on tape so that they could do all the effects and all of that. But they were still shooting film because a lot of my early effects films that I worked on, Flight of the Intruder and Necronomicon and a lot of these effects films that I worked on early on where they were still shooting 35 millimeter. So effects had to work the first time, and effects were practical. And, if you screwed up, that cost a lot of money. The Guyver films, Guyver 1 and Guyver 2, Predator 2, all 35 millimeter films, which meant there was a certain amount of time and energy and labor and crew put into that. I mention all of that because as we started doing effects, we knew stuff was going to be posted in the video realm. So working on miniatures for Star Trek Voyager and building the array model, we knew that it was going to get shot on film, but that film was then going to go to digital or video post. It was going to get transferred to video, and they were going to do video post work on it. So, you were starting to adjust your mentality. It wasn't going to be on a movie screen. It was going to be on a television screen, but it wasn't going to be video. It was going to be film transferred to video. So you kind of developed a technique of looking at stuff like, okay, it doesn't look good like this, but if I stand back a little and I kind of squint, that approximates shot on film transferred to video. Okay, all right, I got this. We started hearing hubbub of FireWire. And FireWire was, I think, the first time where... And nobody understood it. We'd work on these videos. We'd work on these music videos. In the music video industry, that was like... You did a one-day rental, but you picked it up on Friday and you dropped it off on Monday so that you could shoot the whole weekend. And you shot these stupid music videos for artists that you've never heard of. And you were still shooting film, but everything was going to be telecine to video, and it was all going to be posted in video. But there was all this discussion, we'll just hook up a FireWire. We'll just transfer it without any comprehension of what the hell was going on. And then, of course, you started hearing about Avid, and you started hearing about nonlinear editing. And I remember my first experience, I was putting together a demo reel. I'd gotten all these clips from people of all the work I'd done, and I wanted to put together a visual effects demo. And I wasn't really sure how I was going to do it. And a friend said, I work at a facility that has an Avid suite. You could probably come on an off time and edit your demo reel on the Avid. I was like, okay. So he brought me in on a Friday evening and we ingested all my clips. He kind of gave me a breakdown of how it all worked, and then he left me there for a weekend. And I thought, okay, this is pretty cool. I like what's happening here. I'm not doing this.
Yes.
And I'm not waiting for a 15-second pre-roll.
Yes.
There were two major events that I was aware of. While I'm in LA, I have friends who had bailed on LA and gone back to St. Louis, which I would do years later. They were working in regular jobs, but they still wanted to make films. So I had friends back in St. Louis who were acquiring equipment, and they were acquiring the first decent PCs. They were acquiring nonlinear editing programs. But they acquired a camera. One of my friends acquired a camera called the Canon XL1. And the Canon XL1 would shoot 30 frames per second, but progressively. Not interlaced, was progressive. And it was a chip camera that had a decent range on it. And I remember a friend sending me clips from this camera. And damn it, if it didn't look film-like. It looked film-like. And I was really impressed by that.
Hey there, film lovers. I hope you're really enjoying this episode of Cinematic Perspective, but I wanted to take a moment out and share with you a brand new project I'm super excited about. It's called Spectacular Distraction, where I uncover hidden gems and forgotten classics from the 70s, 80s, and 90s. The movies and shows that shaped pop culture, but somehow slipped through the cracks. Remember those films that only aired once or twice, disappeared completely, but got stuck in your head? We'll find them, break them down. The rip-offs, the inspirations, and we'll go through and find out all the different pieces that are missing from cinema today. So if you're as obsessed with cinema and pop culture as I am, come on a nostalgic journey with me. Search for Spectacular Distraction on YouTube, hit subscribe, and never miss out on a hidden gem, deep dives, or iconic moments. Because everything else is just spectacular distraction.
But then the other thing that happened was I was working on a film called Mission Impossible 2. And we had been hearing about digital post-production. We'd been hearing about, there you go. Yeah, the Canon XL1.
I thought I'd do a reunion because I actually have one of these cameras. So this is the XL1. This is the camera that you shot the film on. This was given to me by a friend of mine who bought it because of the very reasons that you've spoken about today. The fact that it was a 3cc chip, right? Yeah, I think it even says it on here somewhere.
I think it was only it was only 1/2 inch or 2/3 inch. It was a very small format, but it gave us a very nice digital image.
Yeah, here's the lens release. One of the things about this camera as well is that you can take the lens off, which meant you could actually go and put different lenses onto the camera. You can see right there how small the sensor is. Now this is his camera. He had to move from Australia, and one day this box turns up at my place, and it's his camera, and he says it's now your camera. And it's. I've always said to him, when you come back, I'm keeping it for you. I've used it a number of times. It does. You can see that it's compared to like the new digital cameras and things like that. There is like an artifact just from the tape. And then transferring it across. And it does have FireWire, which you cannot plug into a computer natively. You've got to get a special FireWire DV box to convert it to use. But, this I remember seeing one of these for the very first time and just, falling, like just drooling.
It was a game changer, and it started a big revolution. And I think that bridged the gap between the professional filmmaker and the amateur or semi-pro filmmaker. It bridged the gap. So did you get
that prosumer?
Yeah, level? Prosumer. So probably the first time I heard prosumer was applied to the Canon XL1. But then, so my first Canon XL1 clips that I saw were probably very late 90s. And that's when I first started to take notice. 1999, we heard rumor that they had used a Sony camera to shoot digital sequences for Star Wars The Phantom Menace. And I went back to the theater and saw that stupid film a third time just to pay attention to the scenes that had been shot with a Sony camera.
Now, was it a Sony camera or I remember it was
I thought it was a Sony camera.
I think this chip was Sony, but it was in a Panavision body, from what I remember.
Yeah.
only because I fought to see the camera.
I remember seeing the footage and knowing which scenes had been shot digitally. I remember thinking they weren't quite there yet. But I'll be damned if they hadn't shot some stuff and put it into a Star Wars film. Because I've been hearing about post-production, digital post-production. I've been hearing about, digital color correction, digital projection. But I my first experience with how fast it was all starting to move was on Mission Impossible 2. We built a miniature for Mission Impossible 2. The miniature then had to be destroyed, and it had to be made to look like... We built a 747. The 747 had to be made to look like it was crashed. So we needed to build a miniature mountainside, break up our miniature 747, and make a crash site. This was a very late decision in the production. And when I say late decision, I mean the film was due to be released like May 25th. And we got the word like April 10th that this was the change that was going to be made.
Because originally you weren't seeing the debris in the mountainside?
Right. They had built like a facade of a crashed plane and put like full-size body bags, and they had shown like workers pulling the body bags and stuff out of the plane, and it just wasn't selling the scope and the disaster of what had happened. So they'd already shot motion control, the miniature of the 747. They gave us the 747 back. We destroyed it. We built it into a miniature mountainside. We put little burned people inside the ship. So we gave it scope. And basically, the powers that be, like John Woo and Tom Cruise and everybody, had kind of looked at the film and said, this is not working. And originally, he had like a laptop or an iPad of some kind of tablet, and he was showing Tandy Newton, look, here's what the bad guy did. This is how horrible it all is. Well, because they had already had this, and they had a green screen, whatever it was they had, whether it was the original footage or our new footage, they were just going to put it onto this screen.
Oh, so it didn't have to be the full theatrical screen.
So the visual effects supervisor, a guy named Richard Urasich, came to us and said, we're going to do as high a resolution 35 millimeter still shots, digital still shots, as you possibly can. And we were like, is he serious? We're going to take a $50,000 model. We're going to build more models, and we're going to shoot this with a 35 millimeter DSLR. And he said, yeah, it'll be great. So, or it might have been 35 millimeter digital scans. But anyway, so we rebuilt this and crashed the model and destroyed all this and redid these shots by like April 25th. We were flying. So we're like a month from release. And you know the old story. A month from release, and you've got to cut negative and conform everything, and you've got to make film prints and crap. No, our images were on that laptop that he shows to the other character, and the film was released in theaters May 25th. So between the XL1 footage and then the digital experience on Mission Impossible 2, you saw it. You saw it happening. You could feel the time compressing. You could feel the access changing. You know, that I had friends in the Midwest shooting digital images that looked film-like, that they were sending to me over the internet, that we had major studios on $100 million plus films starting to compress the post-production window because they could. That's when I started to feel it. So we're getting into like the late 90s, right about 2000. And then the digital thing.
That sounds about right.
The XL1 played a major part in my life moving forward, which I won't go into now.
We can go into that in the next episode.
We can go into that in the next episode.
Yeah.
I've got that camera here. I actually, when I was at university, I went and bought a VX1, which was a Sony counterpart to that camera that we just pulled out, which I have in storage. The lens was built in. You couldn't remove it. But it was a 3-chip camera. It's interesting that over the years, and when I turn it on now and it still powers up, there's a cell in the chip that's like turned off permanently. So you film with it, and there's this one
like a damaged pixel,
like a damaged pixel over time that it just doesn't activate anymore. And if I really want to, I could go film, and I could just put a mat across that and just pick a.
Which is what we do with our Panasonic VariCam now, because the Panasonic VariCam has 1 or 2
dead pixels.
Yeah. But it's beautiful, so we shoot with it. So
absolutely.
that particular Vericam has a like, oh God, like I don't know, like a 14 millimeter to 130 millimeter zoom lens, like a Fujinon zoom lens on it, with a 2x extender. So I can effectively get a 260 millimeter lens on that camera. So there are times, even when I'm doing my 1920 by 1080 2K productions, I still pull out the Vericam and I will shoot to an external hard drive to get the quality, because the Vericam natively only did like 960 by 720, which was squeezed. So then when you transferred it to the computer, it became
by 9.
Well, it became 16 by 9, but it was only 1280 by 720.
Right.
It wasn't
Right.
full 2K.
Yeah.
But because that lens is so amazing, and because the image quality on that camera is still so damn good, I can cut it into the 2K stuff that we do, and nobody notices. But that's
the next episode.
That's the next episode.
I was just going to say, for those of you listening to Cinematic Perspectives, the management would like to apologize for the geeky camera talk that just happened, because I was sitting here thinking to myself, going, "Wow, if you haven't worked with cameras, you're going to be lost." But I just want to acknowledge that. But I do understand what you're saying, because even in the digital SLR world, the Canon 5D, because it has much larger full frame sensor, even though it's like 10-15 years old now, it's one of the best digital SLR cameras on the market, and people still love them, and people were using them to make video and shoot video that way too, because it was able to get as much information across. For me, digital kind of happened in a different way. I mentioned the VX1 that I got, the Sony VX1. I at the same time, I was looking at editing outside of the university, because the hardware was dying, and because I had made a personal kind of promise to myself that every year I would finish a film production. It's a 3-year course, and people would come in and talk about their films for 2 years, and then they go, "Oh yeah, I didn't get the film done." And I was like, you know what? If I'm going to do this, I need to do it. I can't just keep talking about it. I spent pretty much my childhood and teenage years reading about it. Why the hell am I at university if I can't learn it? I had spent the first 2 years playing with the 16mm cameras. I was very lucky. I was the guy who was in the screening room when between classes practicing to load film into the magazines. And when people started realizing that I had an interest in this, they would ask me to shoot their films, because they were like, "Oh, I got to shoot this film, and you seem to know what's going on, and I don't know what's going on. So would you come out and shoot the films?" So I started getting a bit of a reputation, at least knowing how to load the film and run the camera and getting an exposure. So when I got the video camera, I realized I wanted to make 2 films that year. I wanted to do one for the first half, and one for the second half. I bought this Sony camera, and I was like, how do I edit? Because I can't get into the video editing suites, because there's so many students to actually finish. So I started doing some research, and I found a company called Miro that had released a video capture card, an input and output card that you could put into a PC. And this card would actually capture video footage in a format called Motion JPEG. And I was like, great, that's what I need. And I remember I couldn't buy it. You couldn't buy it locally. You couldn't go into a store. You couldn't go into a specialty store and get it. I had to call up the distributor. And the distributor's like, "We only sell wholesale." And I'm like, okay. And I'm like, I want to make an account. And they're like, "How many do you want?" And I go, "I want one as a trial." And I literally made up a production company name on the spot, wrote it all up, got an account. It was $2,500.
Wow.
Because it was well before anyone had ever, people weren't playing with this sort of technology. It had just hit the market. And I remember they gave me the card, and I remember looking at the back of it, and I went, yes, because it had the super VHS plugs, and I was like, cool, I know how to do that. That's okay, that's all covered. And I remember that the card came with a very early copy of Adobe Premiere and the drivers so that you could capture the footage. And the computer that I put it into could not run the video footage. You couldn't process it. It was like, a 486 with like 64K RAM. And I remember like having to open up this computer and just like borrowing from people. I'm like, can I borrow some memory? And can I borrow this? And I was able to actually build a machine that would run Premiere and the card. And in fact, I still have them now. I had another friend of mine who had bought one of the very first CD burners. And I used to, on a Friday night, take my box to his place. We would set it up using really early Ethernet cables. And I would copy all the files that I was editing onto CDs that cost me like $20 a CD. Because again, and they're all Kodak, gold, formula. And I still have them. I still have them in a box. I actually took a photo and sent it to him. I go, do you remember when we were working on this? And he's like, oh my God, that takes me back. But that was my backup, that if anything had happened, so I could get the project finished. And in the last term, the school said to me, can you make one of these editing suites for us, these digital things? And I was like, yeah, sure, no problem. So they kind of hired me. I don't think I ever got paid for it, actually, now that I'm thinking about it. But I was able to give my wish list of a computer and hardware, and I made this computer, and I remember it was like the last week that I was there, and I handed it over to them, and they were like, we don't know how to use this. And they were like, can you come back next year and like take a class and teach the students how to use it? And I was like, yeah, I can do that. So I graduate, and then I come back, and halfway through that, I actually get accepted to the honors program in another state. So I'm going to another university now to finish because they didn't have an option at this university. And I'm teaching the students what's going on. And I realize that what I know I just assumed everyone was at the same level. If you had a love of film, you were reading about it, you were learning all these different things. And I remember speaking to them and just saying, you need to have someone here who's going to teach the basics of editing. And they're like, oh, we do that in the film course. And I'm like, no, because right now what you've got is a whole bunch of students that don't know the basics. And it's almost like, giving them so much rope that it's slowly entwining around them, and eventually it's going to go around their throat, and then they're going to end up with nothing. And a really good friend of mine was one of the tutors, and I remember probably 3-4 months later asking him, how did the nonlinear edit suite go? And he goes, we don't use it anymore. I said, how come? He goes, someone undid the bolts on the computer and took the memory and just stole it, and so they couldn't turn it on. And they're like, that's it. Like, it's sitting there just gathering dust. And I was like, wow, man, that's like a $10,000 system. Wow. It had the best of everything in it.
Well, somebody clearly appreciated it.
Yeah.
Somebody clearly appreciated it.
Someone was playing Doom, like you wouldn't believe. But they were just they had just pinched parts out of it. So that was kind of like the start of my nonlinear.
Hi, I'm Gail Gallagher from Cinematic Perspective Podcast. I want to take a minute to tell you a little bit about Caution Elderly People. A few years ago, my parents were on vacation. On one side of a busy highway was a retirement home, and on the other side was the beach. And there was a sign that said, Caution Elderly People. And my dad took a picture of that because he's got a great sense of humor and he thought it was just funny. We got talking about how active older people are now. Based on that, he and I developed a brand called Caution Elderly People. We sell gift items for the active senior in your life. We've taken this design, and instead of it just being the elderly people crossing, it's elderly people golfing, Caution Elderly People cooking, bowling, boating. There are so many different activities that we have on our website, and they're great gift items for the active senior in your life, or a fantastic gag gift for anyone hitting those milestone birthdays. You can find us at caution-elderlypeople.com, and you can use promo code podcast for 20% off your first purchase.
Then when I did my honors film, I wanted to do a throwback to kind of like the Flash Gordon serials, because my love of Star Wars, it was originally there. So I was allowed to make a 7-minute 16mm film. We shot all the live action on 16mm. And then to animate the spacecraft, which I had built out of just junk, I used the titling feature in Premiere, which was designed to spin titles in and graphics out and all the rest of it. And I realized that if I didn't use the letters and type it in, I could import an image. So I would then go and take a camera. I would shoot it with the same video camera that I had. Then I would grab a frame and then use the linear motion tools in titles to move the images back and forth.
Right.
And no one had seen anything like this before, but I didn't have a computer that I could do it. So the head of the film department had just bought himself a brand new computer, and he lent it to me. It was literally delivered to me to do these sequences. And at the end of it, I gave it back to him, and he said, "How's my computer going?" And I said, "Fantastic."
That's cool.
It was really generous of him to be able to do that, because I would have been stuck. That led to an award from the Australian Cinematographers Society. And I remember at the time being introduced to some guys who I was really keen to get to know, but it didn't work. And they had just started a company called Rising Sun Pictures in South Australia, who are now one of the go-to effects companies. And it was really early days, because I remember saying to them, "Do you want an intern?" I was just so eager to learn whatever. And they were like, no, it's just the four of us. Thank goodness I didn't become an intern, because within 6 months, I was on a plane going to LA to go and do a year's exchange at UCLA, which kept me in LA. So, you get upset when one door closes, you think, damn, it's all done. Well, that wasn't the case at all. And when I got to UCLA, they had, and I think I spoke about this before, they had an optical printer that they had sold, and I kind of went and printed something for the very first time just to go through that process. And then at the end of that year, an email came around, and it was basically from the head of the department saying, "Does anyone know anything about non-linear edit systems? We have just been approached by Apple to work with them to develop a system where students can edit their films on Final Cut Pro, but we're having trouble trying to finish that process out on film," because that was the big question. It was like, we're film school, we're not finishing on videotape, we're not finishing on digital, we finish on film. And they were like, "If you know anything about it, come to this meeting." I ended up working with a team that ended up creating a piece of software called Cinema Tools. And Cinema Tools you could buy, but then it got rolled into Final Cut, where it allowed you to generate an edit list that you could then give to someone who would then cut your negative to the edits that you had done and put it all together. And this was, I think, one of the reasons why the first version of Final Cut Pro was so popular for so long. And at that point, I went, this stuff that I'm playing around with, this is going to have legs. And my focus suddenly went into how can I use digital technology to really push, where I want to go. So I took a big shift at that point away from traditional and started saying to myself, let's look at where the traditional photochemical processes go, because I love in-camera effects. If I could just do that for the rest of my life every day, I'd be happy. And then from there, it was like, let's see what's going on in the digital realm, and let's see if this is a pathway for you to go to the next level as such.
So you've heard me say when I could see the digital writing on the wall coming up, and Gil was talking about when he saw the digital shift. When did digital start to affect you?
Wow. I guess I should have been thinking about this the whole time, huh?
That's the right answer.
Okay, we can edit that part out. We can edit that part out.
Yeah, I don't really know for me. Because I was never, like we talked about, I was recording audio on actual analog tape, and I was editing that. But for school, when I got into video, it was video. It wasn't film. I never did anything with actual film. So all of the video stuff that I shot, and then the corporate stuff that I was doing, was all on videotape.
But it was probably actual analog.
It was analog tape. Yeah, that's true. It was analog tape, and I was still
a digital
editing.
Chip recording to
but I was still recording to tape, and I was editing reel to reel.
Reel to reel.
So,
tape to tape.
Yeah. Okay, so no, I got it. I'm sorry. Yeah. Ta-da. So in 1995, I got a job. I had been working in radio, so I kind of jumped back and forth between video and back to video. And so I had been working in radio, and I got a job working in video, another corporate video job. And they had the Amiga toaster.
Video toaster. Yeah.
I edited it on that for a little while, but it was kind of slow and kind of clunky and in my mind. And they decided, excuse me, to upgrade my computer. And so I did a little research, and I figured out that because I was also helping them do some graphic design stuff, that I basically had one shot at this. In the corporate world, if they're going to give you some money, it's like, okay, here's the money I need. And so I got Photoshop, and I got Illustrator, and I got some other software, and I thought, okay, well, I need some video editing software too. And honestly, at this point, I was trying to remember earlier while Gil was talking what the first video software I was using. But I got the whole system, and a new Macintosh at the time, which you guys, this was crazy because it had 2 gigs of hard drive space on it, and I was in this big engineering company, and I had the computer with the most hard drive space on it in the whole building, so yeah, I started editing on that, and that was kind of my foray into the digital world. But then doing the graphics then as well, and playing with being able to create stuff from nothing on a computer. You guys were talking about Gil was talking about the computer getting the hard drive or the memory stolen out of it. When I left that company, I still had friends there, and because the whole company was PC based, and my office was a Macintosh, nobody knew what to do with it, and it was just sitting there. And a buddy of mine called me up and said, "Hey, your computer just went into the dumpster." And that just was so painful to me. I was just like, oh, man, if it could have just gone into somebody's trunk and come to my house. And
Yeah.
So
That's
yeah,
crazy.
Yeah. So to answer your question, 1995, 1996, that was kind of when I got into the digital realm. So.
Now, I know that we're coming to the end of this episode right now, but I know we've got a lot more to talk about because we just scratched the surface, and we love having you here around the table as we go back into our personal experiences and a little bit of history about filmmaking, about the media, and all the things that we're passionate about. And I guess in a way that makes up what Cinematic Perspective is all about. But until next time, we're going to ask you, and in fact, this is a personal invitation for you to hit the like button and subscribe wherever you're listening to this podcast. If you're catching us on YouTube, by subscribing and liking, it helps us get these podcasts out to a wider audience. And we're on Twitter, we are on TikTok, we are on Instagram. We love getting your feedback. So if anything that we've been talking about resonates with you and you want to share maybe some of your own ideas, some of your own experiences, we love to hear from you. But until next time, and we're not going to stop the conversation here. We're going to talk all about the digital revolution, 2000 and beyond, baby. We're living it right now. So please feel free to join us. And until then, go and make something amazing. We'll see you next time.